Well, good morning, everybody. And we've come together today to talk about our blueprint, the high level of blueprint. We're a team. The community and the workforce and all of the staff have come together to work on this project for a long time, actually. And a team needs to have information so that it can have an informed debate. So we want to share knowledge with you today. And we've got Anna and Paul, who's going to talk us through this. And I'm sure we're going to learn an awful lot. Ask all the questions you want answered, and I'm sure you'll get answers to them. So I'm going to hand over to Anna and Paul, who's going to conduct this session. It's just an hour, but I think it's going to be an hour well spent to look at our exciting blueprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts, and good morning, members. It is a really exciting milestone, as Councillor Roberts referred to there. It's the creation of the blueprint is a major step forward, and of course the recruitment of senior officers in those statutory roles now with Anna appointed to the west and Rob Bridge appointed to the north, and Rob's on as well. So welcome to him. And I'll take you through the slides and we'll talk through those, and then Anna's going to talk a little bit about the transformation and the really exciting opportunities that lie ahead. So thank you, Elaine. So I think most members may well have seen this slide or a version of this slide before, and I'm sure I don't need to remind members what a significant undertaking this is. You know, around about £1 billion worth of services and over 5,000 staff. So, you know, and we're also creating a children's trust, and in the context of dealing with a pandemic on a scale that is unprecedented. And we're replacing all the IT systems as well, just to throw in an added layer of opportunity. And any authority doing any one of those things would be a big undertaking. And of course, the ambition is in Northamptonshire is so great and so exciting that we're doing it all. And we need to take people on that journey with us. And elected members are a very important part of this journey. And we're also, the programme is really grateful to those elected members that have been involved, that have, through questions, and also been involved in those member task and finish groups, which are producing all those outputs already that we need to be able to get to day one. So just in terms of, you know, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we get to day one and all those steps that we have to have in place. But I wanted to reassure members that certainly officers, and I'm sure you haven't forgotten about why we're doing this. And of course, why we're doing this is to make things better for our residents so that, you know, Northamptonshire can be a true champion of outcomes for the residents. We can join things up in a better way. We can help local councillors solve local issues by joining services where it makes more sense to, and making sure that information that would really help councillors in solving some of those local issues is really joined up and available, and it's not difficult to access. So really are focused on making this an exciting opportunity and being that champion of outcomes for our residents, whether that's through education, employment, health outcomes, all those kind of things are enabled through the way that we create this new authority. Its vision, its values and its people are critical to that, and we certainly haven't lost sight of that in ensuring that we get to safe and legal on day one. So we're just over 6 months to go. It's the start of the implementation phase. That high-level blueprint will be followed up with more detail, and that will be out on Monday. And we've got the Children's Trust going live in November, which is, as you know, a really challenging timeline, but one that we're committed to delivering on time. One of the exciting areas of the programme where transformation will be happening before vesting day is in adult social care, and I'll leave Anna to talk around that in more detail. But just to say to members that adult social care will disaggregate in a kind of soft way, split from the beginning of November, and we'll start to operate in that new way, and we'll start to run shadow budgets so that we can see how those costs flow into the north, and any things that we identify through that we can use to fine tune before we actually do that hard split on vesting day. And that's really helping us in the programme to test some of our processes and procedures to make that happen, that we'll have to apply to other services as we move forward. We have also set out in the prospectus way back an ambition to deliver transformational benefits for residents to keep costs of local services down. We set out an aim to achieve £85 million worth of transformational benefits. That's not cuts, that's true transformation. And whilst that sounds a really scary amount of money, what I am really pleased to say through the hard work of colleagues across all the 8 councils and transformation activity to date, we will, by the end of this financial year, by vesting day, have delivered £50 million of that 85 million, which will leave circa 35 million to deliver across the 2 unitaries over two years or so. So the timeline's clearly set out for the delivery of those benefits, and that's really great progress. What is more important in my mind than the savings is how that's having an impact, and that's where Anna's going to pick up the story around some of that work that's going on. And of course, the new ICT infrastructure that means that we'll be able to work more flexibly, and we'll be really able to harness those new ways of working that we've explored through COVID, and really heartwarming to see the way that colleagues across all the 8 organisations have responded to these challenges, that we've been able to do things in days and weeks that would normally take months and years. And that gives me great confidence that in our workforce, we've got a group of people who can be flexible, do things differently, think differently, and that's real credit to everybody, and will stand us all in good stead for vesting day and the exciting opportunities ahead, because we know we've got those people who can rise to the challenge and really value what it means to be a public servant. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to say thank you to all those people and all those members that have been involved and helped and rolled the sleeves up and done whatever it takes, because that's what being a public servant actually is all about. And we're at that exciting point as well with the milestones that are now starting to be live and real. So we're consulting with residents on the new visual identities. We've had lots of feedback from residents. Over 5,000 residents have given us their opinions on those visual identities. In terms of those senior appointments, as you know, Rob and Anna will be taking up those posts very soon. And we also in the exciting position to be able to name all those new statutory officers that will form Anna and Rob's senior leadership teams. And of course, the draft blueprints are a major milestone in that journey as well. So at this point, I'm just going to hand over now to Anna and colleagues to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And hello, everybody. It's great to have an opportunity to talk to you. Although I'm obviously the Chief Executive for the West, I've had the privilege and opportunity to work on the Future North Hants programme. So you will be hearing from me again during these slides while I talk about adults and some of the other things that we're implementing. It's a fantastically exciting opportunity to be part of building these new councils. And with 6 months to go, as Paul says, we're entering a really key stage of our journey as we move towards implementation and to putting things in place for our day one go lives on the 1st of April. Obviously, we're making sure we're answering questions. We've started FAQs, frequently asked questions from staff, and we're making sure that we're communicating regularly with them to make sure that this journey is as smooth as possible for them. But perhaps I'll just hand over to your new Chief Executive, Rob, to introduce himself before we go on to the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Anna, and hi. Great to see you all. Great to, well, literally, virtually. I hope to actually see you all in person. And as Anna says, I feel incredibly privileged to be given the opportunity to be your new Chief Exec and help us shape the really exciting agenda and the new Northamptonshire Council. I'm a really passionate public servant and have worked for many years to help shape places. And I think the opportunity we have before us is really, really exciting. And I've heard really great stuff from staff and some of you that I've had the great opportunity of meeting in recent weeks. We're putting together a really good new team. And I can't wait to join you on the 2nd of November as we take forward the blueprint and get ourselves ready for April and beyond. So I look forward to having time with you, seeing your place, walking around your patch and understanding those challenges and what we need to do. And, you know, I look forward to hearing more today around the blueprint and where we're heading.
Thank you, Robert. So over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Anna, thanks, Rob, and welcome to Northamptonshire. So I'm just going to ask Elaine to share some slides with you now and just explain to you about the blueprints and what they are and perhaps more importantly what they aren't at this point in time. So we use the word blueprint quite a lot, but actually what it really means it's the wiring diagram. It's how we're going to fit services together for day one. And what the blueprints show is how we deliver safe and legal on day one through all those things that have to be in place, either at an organisational level or at a service level. And some services need different things to be available to carry out their statutory duties. And we've got a clear route map to do that is fully managed and mapped out in what we call a critical path, which is just a sequence of activities that have to happen in a specific order to make sure we're ready on vesting day. And that's the jargon, I suppose, around safe and legal and day one must-haves and all those kinds of things. The blueprints also show how we're going to disaggregate and split the county council services into a north and west footprint. And I'll explain a little bit more about what those slides describe and how to read them. And hopefully make sense of them in a couple of more slides. And then, of course, we've got the aggregation side of that, how we bring the North services together. So we might have 3 functions currently that need to come together as one function. So that's the aggregation part of the blueprint. And as we were developing the blueprint, we focused on 4 main principles really to help steer us through that work with elected members. And first and foremost, the principle 1 was safe and legal. And that's about all programmes must achieve that for day one and for the transition. This means that we must have staff, we must have systems, procedures, those policies that we rely on to deliver our statutory duties. And we need to avoid disruption. So the whole emphasis about safe and legal on day one is minimal disruption. Minimal disruption for our residents so that there is continuity of those critical services that are delivered for our young people and old people. But also we don't forget those things that have to happen and seem to happen like magic every day until they don't happen, like refuse collection and those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that's absolutely seamless on day one. The second principle was around support services and ensuring continuity. And many of those support services that are delivered in the county council provided by LGSS. And that stands for the Local Government Shared Service. And that shared service also provided some of those functions to Cambridge and Milton Keynes. So we need to be careful about how we provide those services going forward and keep that continuity. And I'll talk a little bit more about lead authority, but for example, payroll is a really good example there where that will sit in a lead authority. Doesn't make any difference to residents. We have to do it and we need to do it at the least possible cost so that we can ensure that the most amount of money we have is spent on things that affect our residents. So those things that were away in the background that we rely on, we need to ensure that they are fit for purpose on day one and take account of all those things that they currently do and have to do going forwards. The third principle was about being cost effective. So we need to ensure that these plans are affordable and that we continue to deliver balanced budgets. And these are really difficult times, as I'm sure you're aware, with the impacts of COVID and what that's having on services. Sorry, Elaine, if you just go back a slide.
Sorry.
And then moving on to the really exciting area is that principle 4. And you've heard us talk about Safe and Legal Plus. And Plus is the transformation elements, which you'll hear what's going on in adults shortly, and anything else that we can do before vesting day where we can actually make a difference to residents. And, again, that learning from COVID is really helpful. We don't want to stop things that are really working on the ground, and we keep those going, and we look at how we can enhance those and support colleagues at the front line to work differently. So all that plus activity you'll see in the blueprints coming out. Obviously we have costed into the programme now the ability to have a transformation function in North Northamptonshire beyond vesting day, and that won't be at the expense of North Northamptonshire. It's built into the current programme costs with that resource and that capability to support the team, Rob and his team, and services at the front line with that additional capacity and expertise to deliver that transformation and make the most of this opportunity. Thanks. And so those are the principles there in the slide. Those are the ones that I've just been talking about, and hopefully those make sense, and you'll see how those underpin our thinking that we've developed when those blueprints in more detail come out, as well as the high-level ones that we've already seen. We can just move on to the next slide, please, Elaine. So I won't talk in too much detail. It is quite a busy slide, but not quite as busy as the next one. But what that does show there is that whilst this is a bigger council than the component councils that are currently made up, we actually want to make sure those services are relevant and local to residents. So you'll see there that the council hubs and contact centres will remain in Kettering and Corby and Wellingborough and East Northampton, the one here at Angel Square. And Anna will talk about the adult hubs and how those can affect transformation going forward as well, and how we can bring things together in a more cohesive way, in the way that residents access services and not necessarily in the way that we've previously designed and delivered services to make them more relevant. So that slide is also shows how we align things within those kind of corporate directorates as well, around people and place and regulatory services, and how those important functions at the bottom support the delivery of those services. And you'll see some alignment there to the corporate structures as well, and around member portfolios too. So just moving on to the next slide, where it does get really busy. And what you'll see there is some colour coding, and the colour coding is really important because that shows how we're treating those services for day one. And I'll just run through the different treatments. So our aim from day one was to split as many of the county council services as possible. That's the disaggregation box there. I'm really pleased to say that we were, given all the challenges that we've had with COVID, able to split most of those county council services. There are a small number of services that are provided to the county, as well as some to the districts and borough councils that are externally provided. And we're not proposing mass changes on day one there, and keep that continuity of services for residents going. An example of an externally provided service, one in NCC, is that it buys its legal services from a separate company called LGSS Law. So that's what the externally provided boxes mean on there. The other two categories that you'll see are hosted services and lead authority. And if I could just explain hosted first of all. So the hosted ones are the things that we felt it wasn't safe for a number of reasons to split on day one, but there is every intention to split those services as soon as possible after day one. And you'll see a detailed roadmap that comes out for each of those services saying how and when that will be done for each of those services that are hosted. And there are some things that where it wouldn't make sense to split them for day one, where there's a contract in place, such as highways and so on, which would cost more to do and not have a major impact to have it hosted for a short period of time. Another one would be around school admissions. April is a peak time for that service. They're dealing with many parental requests for school priorities on places, and we don't want to disrupt that and cause any anxiety for parents. There is an optimal time to split that when that cycle is finished and before they get into the next academic year's cycle. So we're applying logic and common sense to some of these things. But the hosted ones are a temporary arrangement, most of them for less than a year, and a very small number for perhaps a little bit longer. The other category to explain is a lead authority services. And that could mean that the North are providing a service to the West, or the West are providing a service to the North. And this blueprint shows which way round that might be. And an important principle to note here is that even if the North are receiving a service from the West, they will still have the budget. So you will have the budget in the North for those services. And that's an important point. And what they tend to be, as I mentioned earlier, where we've got those back office services where to split them would cause diseconomies and drive up costs in things that residents don't really see. So like payroll as that example. So that'll be a hosted service in the West, providing payroll to the North. And they are mainly in the areas of transactional activity. And you'll see from the blueprints what those services are and what the North will be providing and what the North will be receiving from the West. So I think that kind of covers all the things that I wanted to kind of explain to help support that. And what the next steps are is that on Monday, a detailed blueprint for the North will be going in the public domain. That is over 100 slides. It is not different to what you've seen today and previously in the high-level blueprint. It is more layers of detail that sit under this. But fundamentally building on what you've already seen, not something different. I hope that's been useful. And I'm now going to hand over to Anna, who's going to talk about that really exciting plus and transformation. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. So hello again. So I wanted to talk you through some of the transformation opportunities because, of course, what we want to make sure is that what we do, we're doing for a good reason, and that's to make things better for our stakeholders, our customers. And as it says there, what we're really looking for is to think about our people and our place that is North Northants and make sure that it's a great place to grow up, to get on and to grow old too. And obviously, we're bringing together several councils in this process, and that gives us a really fantastic opportunity to join up services that weren't previously together. So if we take, for example, the good work that Public Health does, which will be hosted, as Paul has just talked about, in the North, and actually can now start to join more closely with community and leisure services to make sure that people with long-term conditions get to use those facilities and stay well. That can also join better with health and care and adult social care so that we're caring for people when they have issues. But also we're going to get an opportunity to join up our planning and our assets and think about how those services can come together to effectively support our communities, to support our economic recovery and to start to look to the future too. And COVID has been a great experience for us from that point of view because we've seen services work in very different ways for really common purpose. And we've got an opportunity through these new councils to build on that. So this is very much about thinking about the opportunity to make the sum of all the parts greater. Okay, thank you, Elaine. So I want to just talk and touch on adults transformation, and some members will have already heard me talk with some passion about this service and what we're doing, but it's a model actually that translates itself really well to many, many council services. As it says on the screen, our mission in adults is to make sure that we make the best use of the money that we've got available, but to make sure that people in Northamptonshire are safe and they stay independent. We're introducing something called the 3 conversations model in adults, and that sounds very consultancy, but it's actually a very simple model, which is about putting our staff out into the communities, closer to people, working alongside partners in police, health, housing, all the different areas to help people to help themselves. We've seen in COVID how wonderfully people can work together to create resilient communities. And this is a process where our social workers will now start to work in these community hubs to help people who might need some assistance. And it doesn't have to be formal social care. We've got too used to the computer says no type attitude to providing care or not providing care. And we know from experience and best practice that actually, if we work with people, if we stick with them and don't pass them between teams and between services, then we can stop them going into crisis. If somebody does go into crisis, then we'll make sure that in the second part of it, if they need help, that they will get the help that they need. And that quite often might involve us working with housing in terms of a crisis that could lead to homelessness, for example, or with health to make sure that somebody gets through a crisis and then can return to their own home, or with other partners and key partners as well, like parish and town council, which will be absolutely essential to things that go on in a locality and making sure that we make the most of all the assets and the support networks that sit in a community that might help somebody. And if somebody really does need long-term care, then we will make sure that we give them the best care that we can and that it is designed to support the outcomes that they want to achieve. As it says at the bottom there, we're moving adults out into these community teams and these hubs, and they will be placed all around the county. And there will be 6 hubs in the north and 6 hubs in the west. You see there a couple of the key sites that we've already identified, and we're currently identifying more so that every area and locality in the north has a key centre where they can find social care staff who will be working alongside housing colleagues, health colleagues, as I said, voluntary sector and other people to make sure that we can support those people. There will be community hubs, which will be our general sort of front door to allow people to come in and seek advice and help and support, and particularly to support our older people. But we'll also have inclusion hubs, which will deal with the more specialist type of adult social care that we sometimes have to provide for people, for example, with mental health issues or learning disability issues. And we need to make sure that in those cases, we're working with other specialists, for example, health colleagues who deal in those areas to make sure we can provide the best care. Key to all of this for us, though, is that it's about the people that we look after and the kind of services that we can provide to make sure that they have the best possible life and outcomes. On the next slide, you can see something about the difference that we're already finding that these community teams are making. We've seen some really, really great results in terms of people. I think of one example where somebody had said that they'd applied 30 times to get some help from social care. And because of this computer says no type approach to things and bureaucratic approach, actually couldn't get any care because they weren't eligible. But actually under our new model, it's not always formal social care that they need. They may just need some assistance to find their way through things, to connect to other partners, to find other services that can help them with an issue. And we're trying to facilitate that more effectively. And you can see here some of the comments from our customers and the people we're working with that are saying it's really making a difference and they're really starting to see benefits from this way of working. And having people alongside them who stick with them. We have a phrase, stick like glue, to make sure that they've always got one person that they can go to get that assistance. But also alongside that, this is really changing things for our staff. As well as actually putting staff out into these community hubs, we're introducing a new system and new processes, and we're going to be training them in this new way of working about the 3 conversations. And it's a lot of change, but actually it's also a lot better for staff. If I give you an example, today, when a social worker does an assessment, it's a 29-page assessment of a series of questions to get to an answer about the kind of care someone might be eligible for. In the future, we'll be moving to much more streamlined, simple conversations with people about what somebody needs, what they're trying to achieve, and also give our colleagues and staff more empowerment to make decisions that are right for the person and are not predefined. So really exciting times in adults at the moment. Thank you. Moving on to technology, people may not or may be aware that we also investing very heavily in some very exciting technologies. And what you see on the screen at the moment is a blueprint for how things are going to work in the future. We're putting in place some very, very key infrastructure at the moment using Microsoft 365, which is going to create some really, really great abilities to work differently and to continue to support, as Paul said, some of the ways we've worked during COVID, where we actually haven't been in the office, but we've still effectively been providing services. If I could talk a bit more detail about the sorts of things that we mean. So obviously technology for technology's sake is not the right answer, but this is about how we're going to enable people and our stakeholders and our staff to work differently. We will be launching 2 new websites, one for the North and one for the West, but we already have existing processes and integrated systems and forms that sit within all of the councils in the North at the moment. So the idea on day one is that we will have a new North Northants website that sits over those other capabilities. So for the customer, it will feel like a new organisation with one point of entry, but behind the scenes, these processes and systems and forms will still work in the way they do now to make sure that people get their service requests fulfilled as fast as possible and in a streamlined way. So for our customers, they won't see that major change, but behind the scenes, there'll be lots of things happening to make sure that services are effective. Equally, we're going to have new phone numbers for the North and the West authorities, which means that people will come in through one route. Signposted and automated processes to get them to existing contact centres, who obviously will know those areas and know those customers and services, and will make sure that they still get joined up very quickly to the services that they needed. What we're looking for in all of this is the minimum disruption to everybody on day one, but also that it feels like something new and something different. We're also putting in place a new ERP system, which is an enterprise resource planning system, which will cover all of our HR, finance, payroll services. We're building that on top of a system that actually is already used by many of the authorities, but it will encourage better automation, more self-service, and free up more time to be able to spend on those frontline services and processes. So exciting times and some very, very interesting technology, which is going to build a great foundation on which we can then transform. So what sorts of things will it mean for me and for the staff? So we're going to be introducing the 365 technology that will allow people to share documents more effectively without being in the same office, to be more agile, greater use of video streaming, and even an internal YouTube type service that will allow people to communicate between teams and share information. We'll also be supporting more effective meeting spaces and the ability to collaborate far more effectively. And these things will be really important as we're spread around the county, but still working as teams and as one to make sure that we can deliver great services going forward. Thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to Paul, who is going to pick up on the final wrap-up part of the session.
Thank you, Anna. Really exciting things going on there. And you know, when we think back to the first slide with the savings, and when you hear some of that, actually doing the right thing that makes a difference for our residents is actually also the cheaper thing to do. And that's normally the case across most services, and it's really encouraging to hear that and also get the chance to talk to some of those staff in Anna's areas that it's also a better job to do for a social worker. So it's better for residents, it's better for staff, it's cheaper, and that's what we want to try and replicate across all the areas of activity of the local authority, so that we can truly be champions of outcomes for our residents. What you see in front of you is a very high-level roadmap. I would like to reassure members that there is much more detailed planning that sits below this. We do have that kind of critical path all mapped out. We will be reporting through the shadow executive on a regular basis now over the next 6 months or so. The route to get to safe and legal on day one, all those activities, and we'll be closely monitoring that against the plan that's in place. and reporting that for members to give that level of reassurance. But just some of those things that you see there are some of those bigger items that happen along that journey. And the next steps on that journey are around the detailed blueprints that are being published on Monday. We know there are lots of detail in those blueprints, but we are keen to ensure and committed to making as much information as possible available as early as we possibly can. And we want those questions, and we want you to challenge us and ask us why and what and all those kind of things that will help us finesse what we do to get the best possible result for day one. So that's a really important part. And just some of those things that you've seen there, some senior appointments and those senior teams around those statutory roles now starting to be in place. We'll be starting to formally consult with the workforce colleagues with and through the unions in October. We've actually got a meeting with the trade unions this afternoon, and we're talking them through the detailed blueprint, and they've also had the high level blueprint, and they're providing feedback to us on that this afternoon as well. Of course, we know that as is normal around Christmas time, we start to consult with our residents around budget setting. And we'll start to roll out that visual identity in January that's being consulted on at the moment, and decisions to be made about what that looks like and what that feels like, and what we'll replace for day one in terms of creating that new visual identity. The new websites will go live in mid-March, and we'll be starting to make much more of a campaign with the residents from after Christmas to make them aware of changes, and also to reassure them that there'll be no disruption. One of those things that Anna talked about, Microsoft 365, will start to be rolled out in December, and a staff accommodation strategy will be in place by then as well. And of course, that not insignificant task of the Children's Trust going live in November as well. So there is lots going on, and just wanted to give you a sense there that it's under control. It is a really exciting opportunity, and we have that capacity to support North. We're in the process of recruiting a transformation director to work alongside Rob and the management team to actually build on what we put in place for day one. So that's it really from us. We hope we've found that useful. I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in. This has been recorded on YouTube as well, and will be available to look at when you've got more time. It will be out there and available. And as I said, this is only one way, but you can ask questions via that email. But I'm sure you'll be aware that members have much more access to officers and be able to ask questions as and when. And there's also those formal places as well. So Anna and I are at Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the North tonight, talking through these things in the public domain. We're also at the North Shadow Authority meeting next week, and then we'll be taking and talking through with the Shadow Executive the following week in the public domain as well. So hope you found that useful. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to all my colleagues around the rooms, some of whom you can't see, that have made this work seamlessly. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you.